You can just talk to them about while you're doing their meds. You can just say none reported, if none reported. Diabetic foot inspections, usually diabetic foot inspections, if they're diabetic, once a week, is really what you should be asking them. If they're really alert and oriented, you could always just ask them if they've had any findings on their feet, maybe diabetic ulcers or anything. They say no, then you can just say none reported, or the one I usually do is no findings. If I'm on my weekly assessment, but if I'm not, usually I just stick with these two. If we're doing it, then I put other SN for blood sugars. All right, so for psych, or even just psych or full assessments, this neural, emotional, cognitive area is very important. So are they alert to a person, place, and time, but maybe they're forgetful and depressed? If they have any changes in affect or mood, go ahead. Maybe they're agitated, whatever the case may be. Neuromuscular, maybe they don't have any deficits, they work just fine, or maybe they use a walker. Just whatever's relevant there. We never do infusions here. And to do infusions, you have to have your own certification, separate certification license as an agency. So we don't do infusions. So in this case, you would just check this box, not applicable. I wouldn't worry about this lab specimen part. We don't do labs here. So you can essentially ignore that. Now here, this is where the important part is for your note, and it really covers a lot of the rest of your note, so you don't have to really type. Or if you do type, it's really not much. So you click eligibility. So what I always say is whatever's up here on this first box that says homebound status, just go ahead and click everything that is there and click insert to form. What will happen is once you do, this will populate. For interventions, it's the same thing. You click the red button and the drop boxes will come here. So don't worry too much about plan of care requirements. This is just something that the RNs have to put on all of their OASIS. If you're doing a weekly assessment, these are just parameters per policy that we do here at the agency for blood sugars and vital signs. So again, if we're all parameters, just let the provider know, document that you called them. To make sure you cover yourself. If they are a weekly assessment, then you usually would check this off, or maybe both of them if they're diabetic. If they're not a weekly assessment, you don't really need to check their vital signs unless you have specific orders. What I do suggest, though, is especially let's say they're a Medimin, and they're a psych patient, let's say, as you're doing their meds, maybe you're talking about orientation techniques. Maybe you are assessing them through a conversation and the patient just doesn't realize it. Choose whatever interventions are applicable. These last five here are other choices I add. So we'll start with the receptive and not receptive ones. So one thing that agencies tend to lack in as a top 5 tag is that a lot of nurses tend not to document whether patients are receptive or not receptive to education. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and put these 2 choices as receptive or not receptive for literally every single kind of body system or intervention area. So you can just document if they're not receptive or receptive, and that covers it. Once you click it and put in your note, you don't have to manually type it. So again, this is just me putting additional custom templates, so save you time. So what I'm going to do is just say the patient was not receptive. Maybe that's why we're there for Medimins, because they're really not receptive to any kind of education. It's not safe for them. So I usually just put not receptive. This last 3 here are the 3 ones that say assess, are 2 for auditory visual hallucinations and 1 for suicidal, homicidal status. So again, this was just me in efforts of making it so you don't have to type in as much. So let's say they are depressed. So especially if they're depressed, or most psych patients, you really should be assessing for suicidal, homicidal ideation or auditory visual hallucinations. So what I always say is, let's say they did deny suicidal ideation or homicidal ideation, and they have no intent to harm self or others. And then maybe they also did report auditory visual hallucinations. And again, that's the assessment, that's your response. So because of that, you don't have to put that in your note, but please to refer to your summary for more details. So if you chose something like this, please specify what you meant by this. So maybe they did have auditory hallucinations, but there were no commands. Maybe they did have visual hallucinations, but they were shadows on a wall. It's very important. If they're diabetic, then same thing as before with the neural, you would pick whichever you did go over and what they're receptive or not. So for the medication management, there's a few here. I always have the emergency sleep option because per policy, every patient should have 24 to 48-hour emergency sleep. This goes without saying because if a nurse calls out, we have no one to go. At least they have emergency sleep. If it abruptly snows, we have an emergency sleep. So it's very important to make sure that everyone has an emergency sleep because if not, it can create a lot of chaos when a patient doesn't have enough emergency sleep and it becomes hard to send a nurse out because maybe everyone is too busy. Assessor compliance, we're always testing for med compliance. So, that should always be chosen. This should always be chosen. Um, as an intervention, we're always going over the meds in theory with the patient. We're always conducting med management through a pill box or something. These four here that say SN to administer, whatever meds for whatever frequency per med profile. So I just put all of them here so you can kind of see the different choices. So like if they were a AM Medimin, like in this case, I would choose this one, skill nurse to administer AM meds per current med profile. If it was a PM visit, I would choose this one, skill nurse to administer PM meds and pre-pour HS meds, if any, per med profile. If they are a once a day with PM HS pre-pour, I would choose this one, skill nurse to administer AM meds and pre-pour PM/HS meds per current med profile. The last one I have here is if they were a weekly pre-pour, SN to pre-pour medications for 1 week per med profile. The only thing is if you do choose this one, just make sure you put the date range that you pre-poured in your summary. Just kind of like the neuro, I have two assessment ones here. Another issue and top 10 tag for home care agencies is nurses don't document if meds weren't given and why. So, or at least majority, that's why it's a top 10 tag. So there's two choices here. Were all the meds present? Were all the meds present, which would be this one, which is good because then you don't have to really document further. All meds are present. Good. That should, one of these should always be chosen. Or the other one is were the meds not all present? And then as you can see here, it says, please refer to summary for meds not present and why. So was maybe their Protonics not present because it's pending a pharmacy refill? Was maybe their metoprolol not ready because they were waiting a prior auth from the provider? And then you just document, you notify the provider about the need for the prior auth. So again, that just covers you. But again, by adding these, you don't have to add them in your documentation because it's already chosen there. And again, as all the other things have, were they receptive or not receptive, which, if we're there for Medimin, they really aren't receptive. So that's what you can do for that. These two, I wouldn't really worry about these. These are more related to like the RNs for their Oasis, which I'll make a separate video for. So once you have everything you need, you'll click insert to form, and there you go. It will put everything in here. Everything in here, you don't need to add in a summary. So where summaries would go really, they would go right here, ongoing skill needed. I say just put everything there, just so everything's one spot. So if you have to elaborate anything, put it in here. But anything else would go in here. Were there no changes in condition? Was there a fall? What meds did you give, not give? Any of the extra fat to speak or the extra meat, and note that you didn't already bubble somewhere or chose as an intervention or a goal would go in here. So for goals, we chose a neurological intervention, so we should pick a neurological goal, which there's only one. We did pick a endocrine intervention, so we should pick the corresponding one. We did pick med management intervention, so make sure you pick a goal. So essentially, whatever intervention you pick, there should be some kind of goal for it. As we saw here, there was a med management intervention, so we should have a med management goal. Supervisions really are only for the RNs, so the RNs just would do supervisions. So just so they know, LPNs are supervised Q30 days minimally. home health aides every 14 days minimally. We don't do OTA or COTAs here, so don't worry about that. If it's, let's say, an LPN supervision and you're an RN, pretty much if everything's okay, you would in theory pick all these. I would hope that every visit is all the ones on the left. If not, there is a problem and you need to let me know. If there is a home health aide and LPN, what I say is just pick one, and then here just indicate that the same supervisor was given to whichever discipline it may be. For care coordination, this box should always be checked, just pretty much saying they participated and agree on the plan of care. And who did you coordinate with? So there's another tag that is the top 10. That is that disciplines do not coordinate with each other at least once a week. So what I always say is if there's another nurse there with you doing the visits, just always put SN. If it's a weekly assessment, you notify the provider by anything, SN and physician. If they're CCCI, maybe case manager, because in theory, you should really at least be talking to case managers once a month to update them. But at the very bare minimum, if there's another nurse there, or if they also have PT, or maybe they have, I don't think HHA, you can just click other and put HHA. You really should be at least having that in there to make sure you're charting that you're care coordinating with some discipline once a week. The last but not least, where it says discharge planning, if you click on it, essentially 9 times out of 10, this one here, no plans to discharge patient requires ongoing care will be the option. So you just choose that. Once you're done, you will click send to office. This is telling me there's no time in and time out. So again, just put your time in time out, but make sure you're clicking send to office, not sign, save this form. If you click this sign, save form, it will back you out as if you did send it, but you really just signed it. Again, just make sure that you are just clicking send to office. To make sure it's going to office. It's going to ask you if you would like to sign it. You would click yes, and then it will go to office. All right, guys, that's how you conduct a note here. If you have any further questions, do not hesitate to reach out to me on Tiger Text. All right, thank you.